In this video I'll take you through my complete journey of creating and publishing a 1-bit pixel art bullet hell shooter with Godot. And if you are into game development, you'll definitely find a lot of valuable information in this video, as I dive into really specific practical aspects of my game, while also keeping everything engaging and easy to follow. And also I think this game turned out pretty well, so sit back, relax, and enjoy. So first of all, I booted up Godot and made some quick rocket assets. I messed around with the default icon for a bit, as is tradition, then created some rocket sprites, and it was surprisingly easy to implement. I then added some janky movement and made it affect the rotation of the ship. This project actually was inspired by a game I created on Scratch when I was much younger, so I decided to port it to Godot as a way to learn the engine. The new version has a few differences though. I designed it with black and white pixel art to reference classic games like Asteroids. Also, the black and white art helps me mask my lacking skills in the art department, but I think it looks cool too. I then added some more rocket animations, but it didn't seem to make that big of a difference because the rocket is constantly moving and you cannot see the changes in animation. So then I added asteroids, because what's a rocket game without asteroids? So after that I added a nice star background. The background was a challenge due to my incompetence with Godot scaling, but it worked out in the end somehow. After implementing the ability for asteroids to kill the player, I wanted to add a cool animation for the rocket exploding. So I spent some time creating the explosion animation, and I'm not the best at drawing, but I think it turned out pretty well. I then implemented a system for asteroid spawning, and initially struggled with getting them to appear in the right part of the screen, but hard coding the screen resolution resolved the issue. So to prevent performance problems, I made the asteroids despawn after they leave the screen. Initially I used a timer on each asteroid to delete it after a set amount of time, but later I added an area below the player that automatically deletes everything it touches, and this allowed me to make the asteroids fall at different speeds and disappear at the right time. This also allowed me to make the asteroids linger on the screen a little bit longer if, for example, something else was obstructing it. Since I love working with particle systems, I added some moving particles as stars in the background, and also particles for the rocket exhaust. I then experimented with collisions, which resulted in funny behavior, but tried adding a bit of Y motion to the rocket, and it also looked a little bit funky, so I also had to scrap that. So I put together a quick menu, gave the asteroid some spin, and pixelated everything using viewports, which is a way of pixelization I found on a YouTube tutorial that seemed a little bit hacky to me. I didn't fully understand what was happening, but it worked, so I kept it that way. Then I added more asteroids and a button for options, although it currently does nothing. I thought the game could involve collecting gun fragments and resources and all that jazz, so I made the sprite for that. And now you can collect gun fragments and maybe to upgrade your gun? I don't know, I haven't implemented that. And finally I implemented shooting. Now imagine, a rocket shooting at asteroids, what an original idea. Okay, but aside all that, after figuring out the correct orientation for the beams, which actually took quite a bit of time, I added destruction explosion particles. Did I mention I like particles? And this looks weird, but it'll suffice for now. Anyway, my asteroids can now be destroyed, which is a win in my book. I added a dash speed boost ability and walls to prevent the player from going out of bounds. Then I spent some time refining the dash particles, improving the border to act as a force that pushes the player back, added sound effects for shooting, dying, and explosions. I actually used a site called GSFXR, but did a lot of modifications to the actual sounds that came off the site to fine-tune them to my game, I guess. I then added an engine sound that reacts to movement, and yeah, this also took a little bit of time to fine-tune the sound. And as for music, I initially added a placeholder track to see how music loops in Godot. But I found the placeholder track so horrible, so I decided to spend a little bit more time on the music, and this is what turned out. I still didn't quite like it, but it was good enough for now. After that, I decided to have another go at creating a better soundtrack, aiming for a fast and groovy track rather than a floaty space theme, you know? So I started with drums, added a bass, and added some rhythm guitar-like chords on a square synth. So then I created a lead solo line with another synth, and a short drum solo to spice things up. This is probably impossible to play on real drums, but I think it fits the retro 16-bit vibe. I then added a slide effect, roads for variety, though it feels out of place, and transition effects like rises and crashes. Then I extended the song and added some more melody. Then I revised the explosion animation, added an outline to the rocket, though it didn't help much with visibility. Also added bricks flung out by the explosion at the start. And if you're confused about why there's even an explosion, it's about the story of the game. So the game's story involves the rocket escaping a space prison or something. It's still kind of in the air about what I'm gonna do with the story. No pun intended, but I'll figure it out as I go. Then I experimented with post-processing effects like bloom, but I didn't want to go overboard as it can very easily be too much. Then I added some cartoony smoke and now bricks explode outwards, which is an improvement. And also made it so the game speed increases as you play. Then I added particles for everything possible, including the bullet beams, and implemented 2 separate hitboxes for when the player is moving and stationary, making it more lenient, and this helps the players dodge and weave around the asteroids a little bit better, making them feel like they're better than they actually are. I think it's one of those things like Coyote Time, where people don't notice it, but they feel it, and it makes the game feel more fair. I then added a simple pause screen, added a bigger shadow to the spaceship for better readability, and selected a font for the game's UI. Also, I chose the name Escape Velocity because it has a double meaning of a rocket's velocity to escape a planet's gravitational pull, and also you escaping from the police. Then I also created police drones, which would shoot at the player and force the player to actually move, because before you could only sit in the same spot and just shoot up and destroy everything in your path. So now you actually have a requirement to move around. So after I improved the animations on the drones to make them feel more alive, I went and started making other obstacles that players should avoid, like satellites and also space debris and other junk. This for some reason really reminds me of WALL-E, where you could see all the space junk around the Earth. It also gives me cool ideas on what the story of this game could be. But anyway, I added some star particles for collectibles like bullets and health to help them stand out, as playtesters mentioned that it's hard to quickly distinguish between collectibles and obstacles. So I'm hoping this helps that. I then added some sound effects for collectibles and police drones, which took several tries because a lot of audio sources can really make a game feel messy. I then experimented with the spawn rates and updated the collectible particles for even better visibility. And finally I added ammo collectibles and actual ammo so you can run out of bullets. Then I created a mid-game HUD for the player. I thought I would only use one image for the whole UI, but then I found out that Godot's UIs are pretty modular, so I can use that. And also while figuring that out, I also added health, represented by a cogwheel and a little cross in the middle. And yeah, with that I also implemented health logic and hit sounds. Also next in line was removing the shadow from the main rocket sprite and adding it separately, making it easier to edit. And also based on feedback I made the ship a little bit bigger, so it stands out more. And yeah, while making it into a higher resolution version, it didn't turn out that great instantly, so I redesigned it from scratch and it turned out much better. I then added a blink animation for when the player gets hurt and implemented a little bit more obstacles for the ship to avoid, including mines inspired by naval mines, but looking more like a virus for some reason. Hopefully players pick up on what I was trying to do here. I then introduced a police boss drone, and yeah, I made it so it shoots from 2 guns. Also I thought I would make the police boss spawn smaller police drones or something, but I would want to implement that ability later. But I'm unsure of the best approach here from a game design standpoint, so I left this ability in my to-do list. So after that I started creating planets to fly by in the background, and I thought this was gonna be easy. And you know, planets, how hard is it to draw a pixel art planet, you know? And it's actually quite hard. It was a bit difficult with the black and white gradient, and eventually I made something that looks decent. And despite the game being black and white, I sadly had to darken the planets to improve visibility. And I'm starting to think that this decision to go black and white pixel art is not that great for me, and especially the visibility for this game. You just don't know the amount of times I had the urge to introduce color to this game to make the collectibles glow like bright green or something, you know. But no, I must resist, and I must find another way to fix this problem. Then I set up a system that allows adding multiple waves, each with items of differing weights, and all editable from the inspector. So yeah, I added money to the game for upgrading the ship. Then I had a thought. Every game uses dollars as a currency. Let's use yen to be quirky. However, if you convert it to dollars using current exchange rates, the ship upgrades cost just pennies. So let's imagine that yen experienced a significant deflation in this timeline. So creating the shop where to spend the money was another interesting challenge. After a lot of trial and error, I set up a shop element scene that handles all the logic for buying an item you specify in advance. This setup allows me to easily add more items to the shop in the future if I chose to. Alright, so implemented the shop, which appears after you die. Also, this reminds me of the upgrade system in games like Hill Climb Racing. You know, you try to get as far as you can, then you die, then you upgrade your vehicle. In this case, it's my ship, but never mind that. I then added UI sounds using a script that automatically connects sounds to UI elements. This was not my idea, but I have to thank YouTube channel Liblast for sharing this cool method on their channel, which saved me a lot of time. Then I created a rough intro animation that I plan to refine later, and tried making a menu/intro song that ended up being used for the shop instead. And yeah, after that I fixed the scaling for the game, and this broke some things like the shop because it became too big, and I had to remake the shop, but I think it was for the better as it looks much more compact now. Okay, so after that I added an options menu and a feature to disable the intro. Then I decided to implement magnets. Then implemented automatic shooting for the rocket, so you don't have to spam click the shoot button, and this gave me an idea to make this an upgrade. So now you can upgrade the shoot speed. I then worked on the intro animations, made them a little bit nicer with my limited art skills, then created a new menu song with a catchy bass line, and experimented with the synth. After that, I added some camera shake that happens during the initial explosion and also when the player gets hit. And also made the camera slightly follow the player to hopefully make the player stand out more and make the game feel more lively. And yeah, after that was sorted out, I added a zoom out effect at the start, which also took a long time. But on the upside, I learned how to use tweens in Godot, which are actually really useful. And now I'm sad that I didn't discover them earlier. So yeah, after that I added a broken wall with multiple layers to show the parallax effect, because we're like escaping a prison, so you know, it kinda adds to the theme. And also added a slight camera zoom in when damaged. I then experimented with shaders to create a shockwave effect from explosions. I definitely need to work on my shader skills though, because my current solution is just scaling up a sprite with the shader effect. Then spent some time on the boss animation, also modified the boss movement to follow the player, and unrelated, but I decided to add a cool fade in and slide in animation to the title screen. So yeah, hopefully this makes the game feel more polished. Next, I implemented the intro animation sequence. I added this cool rounded window with text on the bottom. I think this is really standard for the pixelated game genres, especially for the intros, but whatever, who cares. Then created inspector string fields for animation text, so I could write out the animation in the inspector itself. Then rewrote the intro text to present a proper story, and I do still change it later a bit. Then composed a spooky and sneaky like song for the intro sequence, really going for that pizzicato vibe, and tried experimenting with the woodwinds. Attempted to add a melody, but it became like this circusy theme. But yeah, that also had to go because that was not what I was aiming for. At the end, I decided to just make it really simple, which I think turned out pretty good. After that, I composed another song to convey like this hope and excitement for the winning sequence. Started with some strings, added a bass, real timpani combined with retro sounding kicks. Then I scrapped that also because it sounded a bit out of place. Made the strings sound a little bit less realistic by layering them with synths, and added some drums and a choir. For some reason when it comes to pieces like this, I forget that choir really adds to the song, I guess. It makes it feel much more heroic, but I think I can just get away with the default FL Studio choir. Even if it doesn't sound that great, I think it adds to the retro vibe. Then created a temporary windscreen and spent some time upgrading it and making it more satisfying, I guess. Oh yeah, and I also changed the UI. You know how when you're controlling the rocket, it's not that accurate and it's really hard to aim at things. So I made the collisions of the beams much bigger, but this sometimes makes another problem. My accurate shots get messed up by the large beam hitbox hitting other obstacles. So I made the system that when you shoot up, the hitboxes are smaller, and when you shoot to the side, the hitboxes are bigger. Because usually when you're standing still, that's when you want to be accurate. So yeah, that's one trick I added. Another trick I added was writing animation to the intro, because playtesters said that they couldn't tell how fast the text would go by, which, you know, makes people stressed out a little bit because they don't know how fast they should be reading the text. Then I decided to implement it to the ending screen as well, which introduced a need for an ending story. So for the ending I made a planet animation, and this paint.net quantization method really comes in handy. You can just make stuff in grayscale and convert it to just black and white. But yeah, after polishing up things like money updating, adding a reset button, and many other bugs that were fixed, this is the final version. But am I going to spoil the story for you? No, you'll have to play the game for yourself. I do need to mention though that this project went through some serious scope creep. What started as a test for creating a game in Godot turned into a full-blown summer project. So I'm slapping a big demo label on it and calling it a day. The game might be really unbalanced, but if you happen to enjoy it, let me know. That might just motivate me to finish it. Head over to the game's itch.io page and give it a try.